There we go.
Right. Just a few minutes. Yeah. So let's start. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. On behalf of IFLA, Local History and Genealogy, Library Service to Multicultural Populations sections, and Middle East and North Africa Regional Division, I welcome you all. I would like to thank IFLA for the support and providing the Zoom platform, especially Megan Price for her continued support. Today's webinar is coordinated by IFLA Local History and Genealogy Library Service to Multicultural Population Sections and Middle East and North Africa Regional Division to share the experience of the Modern Heritage Observatory in the framework of networking and cooperation between institutions and individuals active in this field. Before I introduce our speaker, a few Zoom housekeeping details to keep today's event running smooth. Comments are welcome in the chat box at any time, and if you have any questions regarding the webinar, please type in the Q&A box. The webinar is in English, and you will receive the recording after the webinar. So we are honored to welcome our presenter, Mr. Akram Reis. I introduce our speaker. Mr. Akram Reis is a co-founder of the Foundation of Arab Music Archiving and Research and a member of its management board. He is a researcher in ethnomusicology and a management consultant with an interest in post-conflict reconstruction, heritage, music, and theater of the Levant and archives. He has completed a master's degree in public policy and international affairs at the American University of Beirut in January 2021. In 2006, he organized an interdisciplinary conference on the joint works of Feiruz and Ziad Rahbani, and he later edited and published a dossier on Ziad in the Arab magazine. In 2014, he co-edited and published through EUB Press an edited volume, Selected Papers of Zaki Nasib. So we are so glad to have you, Mr. Akram, here with us, and hope everyone enjoys today's webinar, the role of networks in cultural heritage preservation, the case of Modern Heritage Observatory. Mr. Reis, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you a lot for your kind introduction, and it's a pleasure for me to be today with you and to try to share with you the experience of the Modern Heritage Observatory over the course of a period of around 14 years. The presentation today will be like in 5 main points. First, I will try to set a general framework to better understand heritage in post-Civil War Lebanon. The Civil War took place between 1975 and ended in 1990. Then I will proceed to introduce MOHO, which is the modern acronym for the Modern Heritage Observatory, in its first 2 years of activity. The third part will be following up on MOHO's activity until the present. Then I will introduce very briefly the current core members of the network. And the ending will be some reflection on the challenges and the future prospects of this network. So basically, after the war ended in Lebanon, new trends have emerged regarding heritage. First, in terms of research in the region overall, heritage was, part of this epistemic transition of the study of history, which doesn't only focus on the political part, but rather on the social and the economic part. And this also took place in parallel in different humanities and social sciences disciplines, and led to a redefinition of the concept of heritage and its practices. For us here in Lebanon, heritage was mostly centralized with state-led institutions. But after the war, this has changed. And it has changed for several reasons. Part of it is the epistemic reasons that I've just mentioned. So new actors in heritage appeared. And these actors are very diverse in their functions, in their political outlooks and discourses. And they contributed also to the redefinition and the production and consumption of heritage. These actors include different stakeholders from the society. They could range from individual enthusiastic collectors to experts, to intellectuals, or artists, or activists in the field of memory and heritage, or families that own familial heritage or archives, or local community groups, civil society institutions, like many members of MOHO, private organizations, academia, like many universities which are concerned with heritage, donors, international donors, of course, and regional and international organizations. So this is really a very wide array of stakeholders and contributors. They vary in terms of capacity, in terms of outlook, in terms of interest, in terms of knowledge. Also, heritage, expanded the study of heritage or the practice of heritage into new areas defined by UNESCO and other international bodies, like tangible heritage and intangible heritage, and of course, natural heritage. So in this context, and after the war ended, in Lebanon, the state was still not fully reconstructed and not fully in taking part in as it should be. So to fill this gap, many civil society organizations and practitioners and activists tried to make certain contributions. In this like landscape, the initiative of MOHO appeared. So MOHO started in 2012, and you can see at the top of the screen the Facebook page of MOHO if you wish to follow it. Centrally, MOHO advocates for the preservation of modern cultural heritage in the Middle East and North Africa. Here, we should stop a little bit about the concept of modern cultural heritage. So in order to have a clear scope, and because the field of heritage is so vast, MOHO decided that modern cultural heritage could be of priority. So how was this heritage defined? It was primarily defined through time frame. So it was actually the heritage that was, that goes back to around 150 years ago. It's not more than that. So not back into like Middle Ages or antiquities. And it includes various formats and various disciplines. So during that historical period, for us in the region, it was the last period of the Ottoman rule, which was followed by the European mandatory period, like the French mandate in Lebanon, and the British mandate in other countries, like Iraq, for example. Moreover, not only MOHO focuses on the modern cultural heritage, but also they have chosen 4 specific areas, which are architecture, music, photography, and cinema. And if you notice that, for example, photography and cinemas, they were new technologies that appeared specifically during this mentioned last 150 years. So how did this initiative start? There was actually a public bid that was launched by the European Union. It was funded by both the European Union and the Henri Schpoll Foundation, and it was open for competitive bidding. So meaning that many institutions or many consortiums can apply to this, and the best offer that gets the best technical score and the best financial score will be awarded this bid. And it was, the opportunity for MOHO, among other bidders, to win this consortium and to implement the project over the course of 2 years. At the bottom of the screen, we can see 3 photos from the different activities of MOHO that we shall go through in the coming slides. Meetings between different collaborators, between local partners, and others. So what were the activities during the first 2 years? We have like 2 main axes. The first one is capacity building and raising awareness, whereas the second one is about advocacy and lobbying. So in terms of capacity building, MOHO had several activities targeting political institutions, public institutional sectors for the decision-making process related to heritage, and to awareness raising targeting the general. That included, for example, trainings, national and regional meetings, film screenings, exhibition, the publication of articles, and a website. Through those events, MOHO tried to engage as much as diverse audiences from Lebanon. And so they worked at 2 levels, locally in Lebanon, and also they tried to reach out to seek a regional network of practitioners. And that's what we notice in the second axis of advocacy, which is working towards greater political commitments towards modern cultural heritage in Lebanon and the region, and creation of a network that has the memberships or the contributions from several professional bodies in our region. Finally, we tried MOHO tried in this first phase is to bring together many experts so that they can have a pool of expertise and exchange of experiences among its different members. And they had also a very ambitious plan to try to impact policies and to some extent legal frameworks in Lebanon and in other countries of the region. However, this type of work needs to be planned on a longer time frame. So 2 years maybe are not enough to really harvest the results and the outcomes of the efforts in this area. And here comes one of the main difficulties. The first difficulties that the MOHO initiative faced is that the project by the EU on Henri Schpoll was intended only for 2 years, and accordingly the funding also was planned only for the first 2 years. And it was, a weakness probably in the planning of the whole initiative and in the sustainability of it, for it to have a more incremental and a more medium-term impact. So the members of MOHO during that period tried they took the initiative to seek other sources of funding to maintain their continuity. But that was not easy. and the applications that were submitted to more than one entity were not really received with great enthusiasm, unfortunately. So that also really raises some concerns regarding the sustainability of the work of our network for it to be impactful and successful. So in the second stage of MOHO's work, which starts from 2014 until the present, MOHO continued, but in this phase, based upon the motivation of its remaining members, and based upon the resources that they invested in terms of time, in terms of expenses, to maintain a certain level of activity. So activities were retained only at a national, local level, and unfortunately, the regional activities were postponed until better funding circumstances arise. So this was maybe one step backwards, but at least we were able to maintain the local part, and we continued on holding meetings and trying to engage in public events that included also trainings, exhibitions, film screenings. Particularly, we were very keen on celebrating International Archives Week. Usually, such celebrations include at least open houses held by the members and the friends of the network, in which the public were invited to visit those open houses and to be more familiar with their archives and with their practices in managing those archives. So in terms of also capacity building, we retained our exchanges, though at a smaller scale, and we maintained different types of activities, keeping in mind that Lebanon during that during the past decade had suffered lots of major political activities. For example, we had an economic breakdown during the past few years that was preceded by also a big blast that happened in the port of Beirut, not to mention as well the pandemic of COVID-19 and national lockdown, which of course left a major setback for not only MOHO, but all institutions of the country. So in spite of this, we are still trying to go on with our activities. And this year, hopefully, will be a very active one. We have just finished last week our participation in the Lebanese Library Association conference in Beirut, in the UN House. And you can see the photo of the panel, which included 4 participants. And also, we are planning to celebrate the International Archives Day and Week in June with a series of film screenings and a training workshop, and also guided tours. Proceed with the third part of this presentation. I would like to briefly introduce you to 6 of our current core members. We'll talk about briefly about their activities. They include 2 big organizations. One of them dates back at least more than 150 years ago, which is the AUB Library, the American University in Beirut, and the other to 1961, which was semi-private or semi-publicly owned Sursu Museum. As for the other 4 organizations, they're all civil society organizations. They were launched after the war ended in Lebanon, and they represent a new model and a new approach for being active in terms of heritage in Lebanon. So the first one, in no specific order, is the Sursu Museum. We can also note the website address for this museum. It was established in 1961 and it is considered to be the prime hub for modern and contemporary art in Lebanon. It was very active before the war, and it was re-established and reopened and expanded after the war. Also, because of its proximity to the site of the Beirut Port Blast, was heavily affected. So lots of reconstructions and restorations to the building and the artworks were the museum hosts a diverse interdisciplinary program of performances, exhibitions, talks, and screenings of local, regional, international, and creative artists and thinkers. Also, the museum holds residencies, learning programs, and open access to its extensive archives and spaces. It incubates new publications and research, cultural projects, and helps the experimentations related to new and arising media. The second member is the American University of Beirut Libraries. You know, the AUB in Lebanon is one of the most prestigious universities and one of the oldest universities, dating back to 1866. So the library was established between 1867 and 1870, and it holds one of the world's largest and finest collections related to Lebanese, Arab, Islamic, and Middle Eastern studies. As for its archives and special collections, which is becoming a very vibrant department in the library, it's a storehouse for very diverse archives that includes manuscripts, also thesis, projects, dissertations, posters, postcards, maps, and photographs. Also, this department holds and organizes several exhibits. Many of them are available online by visiting the website of the library, which is mentioned at the top of this page. So now going to the newer institutions, if you wish, the Arab Image Foundation was established in Beirut like 7 years after the end of the Civil War in 1997, and they are specialized primarily in photography and visual materials from the Middle East, North Africa, and the Arab diaspora. They have a very big collection of more than 600,000 photographs, and they have done lots of work in terms of exhibitions, seminars, publications, and they also provide residencies and provide support to artists in their projects and in their also for researchers in their academic research. So the website is arabimagefoundation.org. They were the leaders of the consortium for the MOHO initiative in its first phase. The Arab Center for Architecture was founded in 2008. It has a new concept in Lebanon. It's not only concerned by architecture in general in terms of the buildings, but rather in the archives behind those buildings, which includes paper documents, maps, photographs, maybe sometimes oral history. So they are very much interested in urban design, architecture, and planning in Lebanon and the Arab world. And they have held many exhibitions, seminars in Lebanon and also outside Lebanon. Documentation and Research, they were established in 2005. They try to combine documentation, research, and activism. One of the key founders of this NGO, Luqman Slim, was assassinated a few years ago. This initiative is still alive and still continuing despite all the setbacks. And they try to function as a citizen resource center. by always enriching their archival collections of documents, books, films, magazines, newspapers, and other materials from Lebanese history. And they try to delve into issues of memory, of reconciliation, of critically thinking about the past as a leeway to a better future. So they have done several initiatives, and these include exhibitions, publications, documentaries about themes like the kidnapped and the missing during the Civil War, which is an issue very sensitive to the Lebanese and not much talked about. Also, the refugees, memory, and cultural heritage. Also, tries to use arts in terms of reaching out to a wider audience and in terms of trying to seek a new perspective to understand memory and issues that are disputed in Lebanon. Finally, the Foundation of Arab Music Archiving and Research, which is the institution that I belong to. It differs from the previous institutions that it focuses on sound. So its main archive are sound recordings. It was established in 2009, and it focuses really on the early recordings in Lebanon and the Levant and Egypt that started in the region in 1902 and 1903 until the end of the 30s. They try to promote marginalized art practice called the Maqam art, affiliated with the Nahda or the Renaissance period. It is located outside Beirut, and it's governed by a management board and a consulting board. You can see in the photo here some of the shellac records, here the storage space, and here the digital and 2 digital units for digitization of audio recordings. So we own about 300 wax cylinders and 11,000 shellac records. They, as we said, dating from 1903 till the 30s. And they feature the largest specialized collection of Maqam art in Lebanon, the Levant, and Egypt. In terms of dissemination, we try to reach out to different audiences, which includes researchers and scholars and youth through releases like here. It's a documented CD set, which includes intralingual brochure and selected recordings transferred, digitized and transferred into CDs. Also, we have participated in 2 international exhibitions in Germany and France to try to highlight the importance of this archive and the art practices underlying it. In addition to other activities that include educational podcast that's available on Amar's website, and it's bilingual, and it tries to break the ice with this legacy of the Nahda people. So these are currently the 6 members that are active and are central. We have several friends that are still interested, but we are like the 6 core members. For the last part of this presentation, I would like to highlight some of the challenges and the risks that MOHO itself is facing, likewise its members. In the panel that we held at the LLA conference last week, we were discussing some of these risks, whether pertaining to the Beirut port blast. As we mentioned, the Sursi Museum was highly impacted, so was the Arab Image Foundation. Actually, while I was doing my master's study, I did an internship at the Arab Image Foundation just after the blast happened. And because the whole institution was a mess, but yet they were still able to save their archives. And actually, we had to work from the kitchen of the institution because all the other rooms were really in a big mess. Likewise, all institutions have experienced the pandemic and the lockdown, and they have learned some lessons in terms of trying to use online resources to reach out or trying to think really outside the classical practices, especially that the physical access to their institutions were. Beyond this, the members and the network that bring these institutions together, we all faced great financial challenges, considering the prolonged poly-crisis and the financial breakdown that Lebanon is facing. For example, our bank accounts, which were frozen by the banks, and we were only entitled to collect a very limited amount on a monthly basis. This was a severe limitation for us. Other than this, the weakness of the infrastructure, and it became more vulnerable in the context of these events that I mentioned. For example, power supply is very much inconsistent. Electricity necessary for ventilation or for the operations had to be really provided by the institution itself. So some were able to install solar systems, others were able to get a new generator or to use other subscriptions to privately supplied electricity, so to make up for this deficiency by the public electrical system. So this is one example to mention like the daily challenges that we are facing in terms of our operations as institutions and consequently as a network itself. Other challenges that we can mention, access to funds is becoming more difficult, especially after the international changes in terms of the funding scene. So there arose different priorities that are related to climate change or to the war in Russia and Ukraine. So many European donors made a clear decision to give a priority to the Ukrainian issue, leaving Lebanon with less funding. Even inside Lebanon, priorities were given to the relief work related to refugees or to the Beirut port blast. Also, technology is both as a promise and opportunity as well as a challenge if we cannot acquire these technologies. So it's a dual thing, and which is always changing. So it's a fast-paced changing technology that we need to be always up to date with. Also, as a consequence to the unstable situation in Lebanon, many of the qualified staff that were associated or employed by the member institutions left Lebanon. And this, of course, has certain implications on trying to recruit new staff or to transfer those skills to younger members. And this affected the sustainability of the capacity building of the institutions as a whole. So another issue to consider is that the new standards of practice, whether in terms of like archives of photography or audio archives or paper archives and documents, and we need to keep up with those new standards to training, to affiliating with international standard setting organizations to be always up to date with the new practices. Also, we have the main challenges with the archive itself, because it's always like a race with time in terms of dealing with certain vulnerable items that are very fragile when it comes to the impact of time on them. So these are like overall some challenges that we are facing in our work as individual institutions or as a network to do like collective. So the last part of this presentation is about sustainability and future prospects. And this is, if you like, one of the virtues of networks, is to really put efforts together, put joint resources to better and more efficiently arrive at the joint objectives and interests that we share in terms of the preservation of modern heritage in Lebanon. So we ask ourselves sometimes, and is this, for example, enough to do it through a network, or we need a more structured collaboration format, like, for example, a professional association on the national scale or an NGO. So this is an ongoing discussions on how we can empower the process of networks and whether we can really consult or use other formats to empower our sustainability as a group of like-minded heritage and archival enthusiasts. So what we have done, especially that as WOHO, we have no external funding. We have tried to resort to our own resources, including institutional resources, and we tried to activate an adaptive governance system. So we thought of having like a rotation system among the key members, in which each one of the members will assume the role of the coordinator of the network for a specific period of time, and will provide the resources for for the coordination and its well-functioning. So currently, the Arab Image Foundation has thankfully assumed this role, with including my input, and I think this will be a good step to maintain the good functioning, the good communication, and meeting new projects and plans by the different members more effectively and efficiently. So since like big funds are currently scarce or difficult to attain, we are trying to attain a certain mix that includes self-funding and, if we like to call it, a focused external funding that can target specific activities, specific projects, or specific capacity building initiatives. Being very specific maybe can help in having a better chance of securing funds in those competitive landscapes for funding currently. As I mentioned regarding technology, it's both an opportunity and a risk. Technology offers a lot of opportunities for networks and for outreach and for engagement, especially with new web tools and with communication tools like Zoom. But still, this could be the area for potential like in-kind exchange or in-kind contribution if the financial funding is not as available as it used to be. Also, in terms of the format and the content of and the scope of WOHO, also a lot has been happening during the past decade or so. So in terms of research, there is a growing tendency for inter or multidisciplinary research, academic research or otherwise. So this prescribes that different archives will be available to research one phenomena from different aspects. So we use documents, manuscripts, photographs, audio recordings, only just to serve the purpose of our interdisciplinary research. Accordingly, a range of archival materials can be available per topic. For example, if we are talking about music, so it's mostly or primarily a sound archive, but it's also necessary to have also other supporting archives to study the context, the history, the biographies, and sometimes the mentioned practices in magazines, in books, in personal family archives. So the necessity to have different types of archives is becoming very evident. Here also the LAM nexus and what is known for librarians as libraries and archives and museums is also internationally promoted and encouraged. Of course, its application comes in different extents, depending on many national circumstances that will allow this close and intimate integration between libraries in Lebanon and archive holders and museums. But still, it's a context and it's a motivation, and it puts a vision for us on the medium term to work closely together and to try to standardize our work in this frame, which is the finally, also, or before going to the last point, so based upon what I've mentioned in terms of the abundance and the multiplicity of archives, so we are interested now to increase our scope of work compared to the one that was established in 2012, which I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, which was architecture, music, film, and photography. So we are now trying to open up to new heritage areas, for example, theater, for example, painting, and others, and to respond to this growing need of a wider types and formats of archival sources. Finally, also, although the MOHO initiative started as an observatory, we feel that we can do more and we can have more impact if we have a focus in our orientation towards community in terms of reaching out to the wide agents and players who deal with heritage, whether family heritage, whether individual collectors, whether researchers. And in this sense, the network of MOHO can be a good vehicle in trying to bring together those fragmented and sometimes isolated initiatives that are taken on a micro scale by different parties, and trying to make them visible to each other, to be well known, to foster a culture of cooperation, exchange, and support among them. And I feel that also this discussion can be really be taken to a second step with libraries, especially the American Library of the American University in Beirut and other major universities in Lebanon, and with IFLA. And I've listened to the presentations of IFLA in the conference a couple of days ago about their interest in trying to support networks and to seek more intervention in terms of heritage. So this is my presentation. I hope it brought to you some new points, some ideas to think about, some ways to consider about how can IFLA or LLA play a bigger role in terms of preservation and promotion of modern cultural heritage. So I open up to questions, and I look forward to discussing this further.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Reis. It was a wonderful presentation, and you shared with us very informative knowledge regarding preservation and dissemination of modern cultural heritage in Lebanon. Thank you so much. It was great. So we are open to Q&A sections, and please type your questions in Q&A box so I can one by one ask you questions from our speakers, and we can discuss more if you have like in details questions. So I'm just first question is, do you have historical textiles in your collection? If so, how do you preserve and protect with the changing environment?
As discussed, our focus was really during the past years on architecture, maps, documents, photographs, photography, films, and music. So unfortunately, textiles were not really within this scope. But we are always open, to discuss different issues and heritage preservation and to new sectors.
Great, thank you. Yeah. Please type your questions in the chat box if you have any questions. I just want to take the opportunity and ask like my question. I would like to know you more discussed about like archives, and I want to know that maybe it's not related that much to the topic of your presentation, but just like I'm curious to know about like preservation of like digital cultural heritage that you are doing in terms of even not textual, but like those modern heritage that it's going on in your libraries or just archives, whatever.
Yes, digitalization is really is now at the heart of our work and our perspective. I think if I can maybe briefly talk about my colleagues, for example, at AUB, there are great efforts to digitalize big collections. And as I mentioned, at the AUB website, AUB library website, you can visit some of these digital collections and exhibitions. Also, the same is happening with the Arab Image Foundation, so that the main repository of their work is being digitalized. Using very specific digitalization standards and metadata for photography. For Amar, which is concerned with sound archives and music, digitalization is really at the heart of our work. So we digitalize using the IASA standards and the British Library standards. And we try to have 3 copies of the digitalized work, 1 in Lebanon and 2 outside Lebanon. And we are keen to use international digitalization standards so that this will be compatible with the digital collections of other international organizations.
Thank you. Great. Thank you so much. There is one question that, are any of the materials available online, especially images and documents? I know you somehow explained, but just I want to ask the question.
Thank you for this question. I can, if you like, provide you later, and if you can share this with the online, I can provide you with links as samples of the materials that are available online by the different members of MOM. So this could be links from AUB or from Amar or from Arab Image Foundation or from CIRSO.
Great, thank you.
But
And
sorry, you can always visit the links that I've mentioned in the presentation for each of the institutions. This is one of the ways to check their digital depository.
okay, great. Great, thank you. And the other question, do you have anything related to digital humanities-based things there?
Probably AUB at American Library, University in Beirut. They are the most concerned with digital humanities. They have done many initiatives to digital humanities, and it's good to visit their website and to see what specific initiatives they are doing. Because I personally attended 2 conferences held here at the AUB pertaining to digital.
Thank you. And there is another question that do you use social media to promote different collections? If so, what platforms do you use?
Facebook is used by all members. Some of them use also Instagram, and to a lesser extent, they use Twitter or X. But yes, social media is important because social media is popular, and social media could be one of the ways to gain visibility and to increase awareness about collections.
It's exactly. So I have one comments and question. Preservation is costly, and for the next coming 25 years, it will probably be even more expensive. It is vital to get youth and teens to understand cultural heritage. They will become the future decision makers. Do you have any outreach work to teens or youth?
This is very important. The earlier that youth and school students are introduced to the concept of heritage and preservation and threatened heritage and archives, the more that they will affiliate and engage and be empathic to those heritages, if the term is correct. We're starting from individual collections or collections held by families to what they can find in their local communities. I believe that this is one of MOHO's important activities, and this is one of the targeted audiences in international archives days and weeks. As member institutions also, they have their own outreach to schools. So Sirsa Museum has lots of activities targeting youth. Also the Arab Image Foundation, also in their way of trying to hold exhibitions or do documentaries. Also Amar, we have been following up a school visits program. We are inviting schools from different parts of Lebanon to visit the institution, to check the archive, to see how the digitization process goes, and finally to try to induce them or introduce to them the legacy of the Nahda period. So I believe this is very, very important.
Great, thank you so much. If any questions, please type in the chat Q&A box. I just have another questions until I get any question. Regarding this metadata that you mentioned, that if you're facing any challenges, like especially the language is Arabic mostly, right? So any challenges regarding this metadata?
I think this is different for the different types of archives, whether it's held by different members. I think, for example, for music, using consistent and systematic way of transliterating the Arabic language into specific English words so that they will be unified all across the database, and their retrieval will not be confused or scattered all around. As mentioned, we try to follow the international standards set by IASA or the British Library, but still, when it comes to transliteration, more effort needs to be done. And I believe also more effort should be done on a national scale to really unify those entries and to make them more compatible with each other.
Great, thank you so much. So there is no more questions. I think we're done with the questions. Thanks a lot. Again, it was really wonderful and very informative. Thanks a lot. And I would like to thank all of our attendees for joining today's webinars. Thank you so much. And also I would like to thank Jennifer Brannock for organizing and supporting me at this webinar. Thank you everyone and have a great time. So this is end of the webinar. Thank you so much, Mr. Reis.
Thank you a lot, and hope this will be a starting point in collaborating with IFLA and the Lebanese Libraries Association.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Bye.